under the glowing lanterns of Paris. Just before midnight, Emma stood barefoot in a silk dress on the cold tiles of a balcony. Behind her, the soft buzz of a dinner party carried on without her. Ahead, the city pulsed like it always had, indifferent. She had just read the last message. 4 words. That was all it took to burn down the world she had been building for 2 years. It just wasn't real. No explanation. No apology. Just vanishing punctuation to end what had felt like forever. The silence after betrayal isn't quiet. It's deafening. It screams with the echo of every ignored red flag, every second guess, every time you made excuses for them because your heart couldn't bear the truth. Emma didn't cry. Not yet. She just stood there, blinking, realizing her entire reality had been a performance and she wasn't even cast in the final act. That's when it started. Not the heartbreak. That came later. What came first was the compulsion to respond, to confront, to scream through text, to find him, to make him see. Because when someone you love hurts you, the first thing your ego demands is justice. Some kind of rebalancing. He should feel this too. But what if that's exactly what keeps us trapped? Emma didn't know yet that the smartest way to destroy someone who hurt you is not to destroy them at all. She would soon discover something ancient, something terrifyingly powerful, something so quiet it shakes the ones who expect drama. She would discover Stoic silence, the kind that doesn't need revenge, because peace is the revenge. The kind of calm that doesn't whisper forgiveness, it roars. You no longer have access to me. But she wasn't there yet. Not on that balcony. Not when her hands shook and her phone stared back like a weapon she didn't know how to use. What she didn't realize was this. Her transformation had already begun. Because she didn't send the message. She didn't block him. She didn't run to mutual friends. She just sat down in the silence and let it scream. What if your silence was the beginning of your rebirth? What if the wound you thought would kill you was the door to your most powerful self? Most people won't tell you this, but healing doesn't always begin with support. Sometimes it begins in solitude, in confusion, in that horrible, empty moment when everything breaks and no one is coming to pick you up. And yet something ancient inside you stands. This story isn't about making him pay. It's about Emma taking her power back in a way he would never see coming. And you've ever felt discarded, ignored, replaced like an object instead of a soul, you already know this isn't just a story. This is a reckoning. Because this time, you don't chase. This time, you evolve. If you're still here, if you feel the chill of this truth crawling up your spine, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. Stick with me, because what happens next will change the way you see healing, silence, and strength forever. And if you believe stories like this matter, real, raw, uncomfortable truths that help people rebuild when the world rips them apart, then subscribe. Support this channel so we can keep telling the stories that other people are too afraid to say out loud. Now, let me ask you this and be honest. When someone deeply hurts you, what's your first instinct? A. I want them to feel what they made me feel. B. I want to be free from them, no matter what. Drop your answer in the comments. Let's see how many of us are ready to rewrite the rules of pain. Emma didn't tell anyone what she almost did. 3 nights after that message, those 4 cold words that shattered her heart, she sat on her apartment floor in Chicago, staring at her phone like it owed her closure. She had spent hours writing and rewriting a long, scathing message. It was the kind of message that laid everything bare. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the way he drained her light and called it love. She wanted to expose him, make him feel small, make him finally see her pain. But just before she hit send, something in her shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was wisdom, or maybe it was the quiet voice inside, the one we all tried to drown, that whispered, "What do you really want? To be right or to be free?" That night, Emma chose something she had never chosen before. She didn't send the message. Instead, she deleted it. Every word, every comma, every draft. And in that moment, she made a move so rare, so powerful. It changed her forever. She chose peace over payback. It sounds simple. It's not. The most difficult decision you will ever make after being hurt isn't whether to forgive, it's whether to continue bleeding for someone who isn't even watching. You bleed. Emma realized that trying to get even meant she was still playing by his rules. He got to be the storm, and she was stuck in it. But peace was a new game entirely, a silent rebellion, a reset of power. She began to think of her energy like currency. She had 100 emotional units each day. She could spend 30 wondering if he regretted it, another 20 imagining what she'd say if he reached out, maybe 10 more reading old messages, searching for signs. Before noon, she'd already bankrupted herself, and he wasn't even present. So she created a new habit, a ledger. Every night, she wrote down how she had spent her energy that day on herself, or on him. At first, it was humbling. She was giving away most of her life to someone who had already walked away. But day by day, she adjusted, redirected, reclaimed. Peace didn't mean pretending it never happened. It didn't mean pretending she wasn't still broken in places. It meant learning to sit with the pain without turning it into poison. She allowed herself to feel everything, but she refused to weaponize it. That's where emotional intelligence lives, not in suppression, but in self-regulation. The ability to pause and ask, is this worth my energy? Will this move me forward or keep me stuck? Emma started small, a morning ritual. She'd place her hand on her chest before getting out of bed and say aloud, "Today, I choose peace." It felt awkward at first, almost performative, but words have weight, and repetition creates belief. Over time, those 5 words became armor. She unfollowed people without making it a statement. She walked away from drama without a mic drop. When mutual friends brought him up, she'd say, "That chapter's closed," and mean it. She didn't need them to pick sides. She had finally picked herself. The more she pulled her energy inward, the more grounded she became. She cooked for herself like she used to cook for him. She started running again, not away from the pain, but into herself. She read philosophy in cafes and left her phone at home. She wrote poems she never shared, and here's what she learned. When you stop trying to make them feel it, you finally start healing it, because peace isn't passive. It's a decision. It's saying, you no longer get to occupy my mind rent-free, and it's not just about letting go of them. It's about letting go of the version of you that needed their validation to feel whole. There will always be a part of you that wants justice, that wants acknowledgement. But when that part quiets down even just a little, you'll start to hear something louder, yourself. And in that stillness, you'll realize the most powerful comeback isn't proving they were wrong. It's proving to yourself that you were always more than they ever saw. There was no final conversation, no emotional farewell, no "we need to talk" moment under dim lights. Emma just stopped showing up, not out of spite, not because she was trying to make a statement, but because something inside her quietly snapped into clarity. She realized that closure doesn't always come in a conversation. Sometimes, it comes in a decision. For weeks, Emma had rehearsed what she'd say if she confronted him. She had written paragraphs in her head, memorized them, like a script. But every time she imagined the scene, the same truth interrupted her fantasy. He wouldn't listen. He never really had. And what she was chasing wasn't clarity, was control. She wanted to force him to feel what he had refused to feel when it mattered. She wanted acknowledgement from someone who had never given it freely. So instead of confrontation, she chose departure. Silent, clean. Final. Her first step was subtle. She stopped replying to messages that didn't carry purpose. She muted conversations that used to trigger her. She didn't make a grand announcement, didn't post passive-aggressive. Stories didn't turn her pain into a performance. She understood something deeply Stoic. Attention is power, and she was no longer giving hers away to someone who never protected it. Next, she restructured her digital world. She unfollowed, unsubscribed, removed photos from shared albums, not to erase the past, but to release herself from its daily grip. She even changed her lock screen, a small act, but symbolic. The past no longer had access to her present. She started practicing what she called micro-boundaries. They weren't loud or obvious. They were pauses before responding, deep breaths before saying yes, choosing not to explain herself to people who only listened to respond, not understand. With each decision, she reinforced a sacred truth. Her peace was not up for debate. Emma also wrote a letter not to him, but to herself. She called it her boundary manifesto. It wasn't angry. It was clear. I do not owe anyone the unfiltered access to my heart just because they once held it. I do not have to stay in conversations that drain me. I will not soften my no to make someone more comfortable with my boundaries. My silence is not punishment. It is protection. She read that letter every morning for a week. Each time, her posture straightened a little more. What most people don't understand is that boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about choosing who gets to walk in and on what terms. A boundary isn't a wall built from pain. It's a gate built from self-respect. Of course, some people didn't take it well. Mutual friends reached out. You've changed. One even asked, aren't you being dramatic? But Emma didn't flinch. She had learned something profound. How people respond to your boundaries reveals everything about their intentions. The people who truly care about you will adapt. They'll ask, what do you need? The ones who are only there to take will protest your limits. They will call your growth an inconvenience. Let them be, because when you stop over-explaining, you start healing. When you stop giving access to everyone, you start giving attention to what actually matters. Emma didn't disappear. She just became inaccessible to the chaos. She replaced texting wars with nature walks. She replaced rereading old conversations with journaling new goals. She made room for stillness, for books, for mornings that didn't begin in anxiety. One night, sitting in her apartment with candlelight flickering on the wall, she whispered to herself, "This is mine now, my energy, my space, my peace." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was enough. And when he finally did reach out weeks later, casually, as if nothing had happened, Dima didn't reply. Not because she was angry, but because her silence now served as her clearest boundary. That's the power of the quiet exit. It doesn't beg, it doesn't blame, it just leaves, and leaves no door open behind it. Emma had always believed healing was about forgetting about erasing memories, deleting messages, tossing photos into the trash. But when she arrived in Iceland, surrounded by windswept cliffs and black sand beaches, she realized something else entirely. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without reliving. It's about retelling the story not from the voice of pain, but from the voice of power. The landscape mirrored her mind, vast, raw, unfiltered. Iceland didn't hide its scars, volcanoes, glaciers, lava fields, all coexisting in wild harmony. It didn't pretend the past hadn't shaped it. And standing there, Emma understood. She didn't have to erase the past to be free from it. She just had to rewrite what it meant. She began with a journal, not a pretty one, just a plain black notebook she picked up from a gift shop near Reykjavik. She called it the Truth File. In it, she documented everything, every wound, every trigger, every lie she once swallowed to keep the peace. But she didn't stop there. For every entry, she forced herself to write 3 versions of the story. First, the raw truth, what actually happened. Second, the meaning she had given it at the time, the painful interpretation. Third, a new meaning, one rooted in strength, not shame. One entry read, He left without a word. I must not have been worth the explanation. She crossed it out and replaced it with, he lacked the courage to face discomfort. His silence reflects him, not me. Another entry said, I kept forgiving because I didn't want to lose him. She revised it. I kept forgiving because I didn't want to face the loneliness. I see that now, and I'm learning to face it. Each time she rewrote the narrative, it was like reclaiming a piece of her spirit. Not to blame herself, but to understand herself. There's a difference. Blame traps you in guilt. Understanding gives you direction. Emma realized how often she had edited herself to keep the peace biting her tongue, shrinking her needs, walking on emotional eggshells to avoid triggering his disinterest. She didn't just lose him. She had been slowly losing herself all along, so she made a vow. Never again would she confuse silence for strength or tolerance for love. Never again would she rewrite herself to fit into someone else's fragile definition of comfort. She created her own ritual of rebirth. On her last night in Iceland, she hiked alone to a cliffside overlooking the ocean. The wind was sharp, the sky painted in violet dusk. She brought with her the first pages of that journal, the ones that still hurt the most, and read them aloud to the wind. She didn't cry. She didn't break. She just let the truth hang in the air. Then, one by one, she burned those pages. The smoke didn't erase her past. It honored it. It was her way of saying, I lived this. It shaped me, and now I move forward. She returned to her hotel in silence, holding only the blank pages left behind. From that moment, Emma didn't just want to survive. She wanted to rebuild a life where she was the center, not the supporting role in someone else's story. She made space for new dreams. She enrolled in a photography course she had put off for years. She started pitching ideas for a book she once said she wasn't ready to write. Every day she asked herself one powerful question: who am I without this pain? The answer was never immediate, but it always arrived bit by bit as she continued to live, love, and show up for herself in ways no one else ever had. And this is what most people miss when they talk about healing. It's not about waiting to feel whole. It's about acting from the part of you that already knows you're worthy, if it's just a whisper. It's about choosing to become the author, not the echo dot in rewriting her narrative. Emma didn't change the facts. She changed the meaning, and by doing so, she became the hero of a story that once tried to write her as a victim. Not because it was easy, but because she was finally ready to tell the truth on her own terms. Emma didn't plan to be unrecognizable. She didn't set out to create a version of herself so elevated that even her past would feel foreign. But that's exactly what happened, not because she sought revenge, but because she grew so relentlessly that retaliation lost its appeal. What began in heartbreak had now become a quiet revolution, and its anthem wasn't noise or chaos. It was calm. After returning from Iceland, something in Emma shifted. The world still moved, the same. People still gossiped, relationships still fractured around her, but inside, the turbulence had settled. She no longer flinched at the thought of him. She no longer braced herself for closure that would never come. There was a new clarity rising inside her, a stillness that felt like power. She stopped explaining her silence. She stopped performing emotional labor for people who once demanded her softness but never offered safety. She didn't say, I'm healing. She just lived like someone who was. And it was that subtle shift, not loud, not dramatic, that transformed everything. Emma learned a truth that few understand. Growth is disruptive, not because you want it to be, but because when you no longer engage in old patterns, the people who benefited from your brokenness start to notice. They don't recognize your peace. They misread your silence. They say you've changed, because you have. He reached out again. Of course, he did. It always happens when the one who was discarded becomes the one who no longer reacts. The text was casual, nostalgic, a breadcrumb, not an apology. A test, not an attempt at redemption. Emma stared at the screen for a moment, not with longing, but with detachment. She didn't feel the urge to respond. Her silence wasn't calculated. It was honest. She simply didn't have anything left to say. That was the victory. It wasn't the perfect comeback. It wasn't proving she had moved on. It was the fact that she no longer needed to be seen by someone who had never truly looked at her. Her validation had come home to herself. Emma began to treat peace like a practice. Every morning, she asked herself, what would the calmest version of me do today? She kept her phone on Do Not Disturb until noon. She journaled before reacting. She breathed before replying. She smiled more and explained less. And in that space of calm, something extraordinary happened. Her creativity returned. She started shooting photos again, portraits of strangers, cityscapes, sunrises. She began teaching a community workshop on storytelling through imagery. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers again. She challenged herself to go 7 days without reacting to emotional triggers. No impulsive texts. No defending herself when misunderstood. No chasing closure. Just observation, presence, stillness. It was harder than she thought, but more liberating than she imagined. By the end of the week, she felt light, as if every moment she didn't react, she reclaimed a piece of her freedom. People noticed. Her energy changed. Friends commented on how grounded she seemed. Even strangers were drawn to her quiet strength. Not because she was trying to impress anyone, but because self-mastery has a frequency you can feel without words. That's when Emma understood what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The ones who hurt you expect noise. They expect pain to ripple outward. But when you become unshakable, when you don't respond the way they predicted, it unsettles them. They don't know what to do with someone who's grown beyond their reach, and that's the true revolution. It's not about destruction. It's about evolution." Emma didn't need to burn bridges. She didn't need to prove anything. She just built a life so rooted, so peaceful, so undeniably hers that no storm from the past could shake it again. She had become what every person who ever tried to break her feared the most: unreachable, unbothered, and quietly powerful. It didn't happen all at once. There was no grand reveal, no cinematic transformation. Just a quiet shift, one that happened slowly, then all at once. Emma no longer carried the ache in her chest. The questions stopped swirling. The desire for them to understand, for him to explain, simply vanished. It didn't matter anymore. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because her life had become so full. There was no longer space for the past. She stood in a small gallery in New York City, her photographs lining the walls, each one a moment she had captured in silence. A child dancing in the street, a couple laughing in the rain, an old man staring out at the ocean. They were all fragments of life, raw and alive, and every single one was a reflection of who Emma had become. He wasn't there. He didn't know. He didn't need to. That was the difference now. She used to imagine scenarios where he'd see her thriving and finally realize what he had lost. She thought that would feel like justice. But now, standing in the center of her own creation, she felt something better. Indifference. Not numbness, not bitterness, just distance. Like watching an old movie that no longer moved her. Emma had created a new standard for herself. One that wasn't built on reaction or revenge, but on values. Her time had become sacred. Her attention intentional. Her boundaries were no longer negotiable. They were quiet declarations of self-respect. Each morning, she began with a ritual. She called it Declare the Day. No affirmations posted on Instagram. No grand vision boards. Just one question, whispered softly while making her coffee. What kind of peace will I protect today? That question shaped every decision. Who she replied to, where she went, what she allowed, and what she gently let go. She had stopped explaining her boundaries, not out of arrogance, but wisdom. Some people, she realized, only loved the version of her that didn't have any. When she stopped shrinking to make others comfortable, some disappeared, and that was okay. Not everyone is meant to grow with you. Some are only meant to wake you up. The people who stayed, the ones who respected her peace, her pace, her silence, those were the people who helped her build the next version of her life. Together, they didn't dwell on the past. They created moments that made the past feel small. Emma also stopped chasing meaning from others. She found it in the little things, the way the light hit her apartment at 7 a.m., the rhythm of her breath during yoga, the quiet comfort of finishing a book alone at a coffee shop. Her life was no longer about proving she was okay. It was about actually being okay. Sometimes, he would still cross her mind, but not like before. Not with longing or anger, just a passing thought, like a name you once knew, a story you once loved, a language you no longer speak. She never blocked him. She didn't need to. She had outgrown the emotional gravity that once pulled her back. And when someone loses the power to pull you emotionally, that's the clearest closure of all. Emma had become her own proof. She didn't post her milestones. She didn't invite validation. She simply lived, and her life, in its quiet confidence, spoke louder than any closure ever could. Because this was the final truth she came to understand. You don't have to win the war. You just have to stop showing up to the battlefield. You don't have to silence your pain with revenge. You silence it by creating a life where their name never echoes again. And when they finally think about you, and they will, it won't be the version they knew. It will be the version they'll never get close to again. That's not pettiness. That's evolution. Emma didn't move on to make a point. She moved on because her future deserved more than a story stuck on repeat. She became so invested in becoming, so focused on the life ahead, that the past naturally fell away. And the most powerful part, she never looked back. Not because she forgot, but because she finally remembered who she was before they ever touched her peace. Emma's story wasn't one of loud transformation. It wasn't a triumphant scream into the void. It was quieter than that, deeper. A journey carved in silence, strength, and a refusal to be owned by pain. What began as a betrayal, a devastating, emotional abandonment in the heart of Paris, evolved into something far greater than anyone, especially the one who broke Herkadev, predicted. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't craft the perfect text to shatter his pride. She didn't make a dramatic exit. Instead, she disappeared into her own life, quietly, strategically, powerfully, not to escape him, but to find herself. Emma's transformation began, not with fixing what was broken, but with owning the fact that she had been trying to prove her worth to someone who never valued it. That realization cut deeper than the betrayal itself, and it set her free. Free from performing, free from over-explaining, free from seeking closure from someone who never gave clarity to begin with. She chose peace over payback, and that choice reshaped her future. Every time she wanted to react, she chose to protect her energy instead. Every time she felt the urge to explain, she chose silence. Not because she didn't feel, but because she finally understood the cost of giving her emotions away to people who mishandled them. By walking away without a sound, she reclaimed the loudest part of herself. She set boundaries, not out of anger, but from clarity. She didn't punish anyone. She simply stopped allowing chaos into her inner world. Her power came not from control, but from self-regulation. And when she could have waited for closure, she chose to create her own. In Iceland, Emma didn't try to erase the pain. She honored it, rewrote the story, and turned her scars into a foundation. Her pain didn't make her bitter, it made her precise. She didn't forget the past. She used it as fuel, as a compass, as proof. Emma's growth didn't need to be shared to be real. It was felt in how she showed up for herself, how she rose early, created, taught, laughed again. She didn't win by making anyone feel sorry. She won by becoming someone they could never reach again. This is the deepest kind of healing. The kind where you no longer perform recovery, you live it. And in the end, Emma didn't just move on. She transcended. She built a life so expansive, so rich in peace and purpose, that those who once drained her energy simply faded into irrelevance. So what can we learn from her story? The lesson is simple, but not easy. Your healing isn't a performance. It's not for social media. It's not to get a reaction. True healing is internal. It's invisible at first, but it becomes visible in how you carry yourself, how you set standards, how you protect your time, and how you no longer flinch at the thought of people who once haunted you. This story is a reminder that growth doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to stop bleeding for people who didn't care that you were hurt. So if you're in a season where someone's absence is louder than their presence ever was, pause, take your power back. Not by seeking revenge, but by choosing clarity. Choose to protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And when they notice your silence, when they try to reach back and remember, your greatest victory isn't responding, it's evolving. Now I want to ask you something. If someone deeply hurt you, and you had two paths, one where you get even, and one where you get free, which one would you take? And more importantly, which version of you do you want to meet on the other side? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe healing can happen in silence? Have you ever had to walk away from someone without a word? Share your story below. Someone reading might need to hear it. And if this message hit something real in you, if it gave you even a spark of clarity, please consider subscribing. It helps this channel continue bringing honest, meaningful content that speaks to where we truly are, not the polished version, but the real one. The one that still aches, still grows, still rises. Subscribe now and let's keep walking this path together, because healing might begin alone, but peace is something we build side by side.